Well, as the council may remember, after an extensive bidding process, the county negotiated with Motorola as the in essence winning bidder in a sense. And from that, last November, there was an ordinance approving a contract with Motorola. It's actually Motorola Solutions, which is the part of it, I guess, that is now the radio arm of Motorola. And heading up that team that put the bid together is the vice president of Motorola, Scott Shapel, who's here in front of you, and I know Nancy met, and don't know if Joe Cronin, Councilman Cronin, and Councilman Brazel, in reverse order, there, met yet. And since then, well, actually, as part of that team, also David Pazinski, who's the engineer. Did I get close, Dave?
Sure, pretty close.
Sorry, I'm sorry. You'd think with a last name like Lycum, I could get other difficult last names, but I continuously screw his last name up. Who's done coverage testing and the engineering work, and then Brian Grewe joined as our project manager. And in the audience also is Hank Henderson, who has also been working on putting the system together. And then also at the table, as many of you know, Lieutenant Steve Roach from the Sheriff's Department, the Director of Emergency Dispatch and Alarm, Bob Watts, and Dwayne Kinley, and then everybody knows Jennifer. So Motorola joined us last.
Not tonight.
Sorry.
She looks different.
This is Jennifer with flat hair. So Motorola joined us last December. And what they came on board to do revolved around what the bid asked for. And if you remember, we had a professional firm that had worked with St. Louis County, with our county, and with Jefferson County, who RCC, which helped us to develop what that bid should look like. Mm-hmm. And the bid was around a couple of pre-established parameters, that there was a microwave component that was going to interlock all of the systems in the various counties, so that we had an interoperable system that ran through all 8 counties that participate in the East-West Gateway program and in the STARS network. So we picked up St. Clair, Madison, and Monroe County, Illinois, as well as Jefferson County, St. Louis County, Franklin County, and St. Charles County, and St. Louis City on the Missouri side. So STARS paid for the microwave link, or what they thought would be the cost of the microwave link. As it was, the link ended up being more extensive than what they had initially programmed for. So there is a portion of that we're picking up. And then Motorola was told to design a system to a certain specificity of coverage that gave our first responders good clarity on the road, in their mobile, on what's in their car or in their vehicle, and on their hip for when they're out of the car, how the radio sounds. And it was intended to cover a lot of coverage gaps that existed in the county. So without getting into a whole lot more extensive version, I hope that's a good intro. And we've asked Motorola to come tonight to give you some of the coverage parameters, some of the physics of how the coverage parameters work, and so they're prepared to do that.
Okay. So we'll start with, when you get the presentation up, some of the basic physics behind site location and coverage design, or system design for public safety communications. When we get through that, we'll talk about some of just the specifics of where we are from St. Charles County specifically for site location. And then the third element is some of the regional interoperable capabilities that have come to light here recently that Joanne referenced. So on the first piece with site selection and radio coverage. So the primary 2 drivers in public safety communications when we go in and design these networks is radio coverage and capacity. Okay? Coverage is simply the ability of first responder to have clear and reliable voice communications between each other. Okay? So we're trying to do that countywide. The second is capacity, which is really around the number of conversations that can happen simultaneously at any given time. Okay, so in many of today's networks, that's 1. In the new networks, we're talking 16 parallel simultaneous conversations, right? So the size of the number of phone lines you have, if you will, or the number of conversations you can have. So those are really the primary 2 drivers that we look to achieve. So when we're looking to acquire or build sites or leverage existing sites in a design, those are the primary things we're looking to do. Now, each of these sites in the county are actually interconnected together through a microwave system that Joanne referenced, so they don't act independently. So what happens with one impacts the other 11 in the county. Okay, so if we move one, it's a series of dominoes. They can all be affected and they can all move. Okay, and in doing so, you can create needs for additional sites, taller sites, and those things impact schedule and cost. Okay, so there's a balance there of coverage, cost, and schedule that we're going to talk about the impacts of. Okay, so just some of the basic things that impact radio coverage. And we're talking about reliable voice communications for first responders. And the first one is terrain. So when you look at a tower site, if we had flat ground, or like you have on the east side of the county, you get a nice round circle. It's pretty predictable. If you move the tower a mile one way, the circle moves a mile one way, and so forth. Terrain plays a huge impact on that. So when you look at areas that have significant terrain, it can impact coverage. Let me give you an example. So if we place a tower site here where we have hills and valleys, and as that radio signal, RF signal, propagates, it goes in a pattern out from the tower and covers a lot of area. When you get through terrain on the backside of hills, right, in valleys and so forth, you'll get shadowing from the ground. You can't talk through the ground, and that's dictated there in the green. So the green is areas of no coverage, right? And the yellow is areas where we have good, reliable communications for our first responders. Okay, so terrain has a significant impact on where you get reliable coverage and you don't. Okay. A second element that impacts reliable coverage is what we call land clutter in Motorola, but it's buildings have a different impact than residential areas, have a different impact than agriculture areas. Trees have a different impact than cornfields. Okay, so all those things provide loss or impact how a radio signal can cover. So when you start combining those things together and putting multiple tower sites together to try to give reliable coverage countywide, all those are variables that go into how you site towers. So in this example, if we put a second tower site in, we'll keep it at 2 for this example, to try to fill in some of these holes and get around some of the clutter situations. In this case, we're putting a tower on this side of the county, tall tower, be able to shoot over the buildings and so forth. So it'll fill in those green areas. Okay, and now you'll have good, reliable communications throughout. If you take and move that tower a little bit and shorten it up, just give you an example of how the variables work, we may still pick up some of these areas of lack of coverage that were terrain driven, but now we're getting blocked by these buildings, and we will not pick up the one green area on the upper part of the map. So that's how moving these things can impact, and by doing so, that creates a couple things. One, you can raise the tower height to try to get back over the buildings. 2, you could add another tower over in that location to fill in the hole. All right, so just trying to illustrate how these things play together and what the impacts of terrain and the environment in the county you're in. You have areas of the county that are rural, some that are flat, some that are hilly, some that have significant urban concentrations. So all those things play into trying to locate sites that we can economically and reliably cover the county for first responders and the citizens. Okay. Any questions on some of that at this point?
It seems clear.
Okay, so now we'll get into a little bit about where we are with St. Charles County and the site selection. So in this process, since last December and even a little bit before that, we've looked at over 60 different existing and potential tower sites in the county to try to get that best combination, schedule-wise, dollar-wise, coverage-wise, to provide and meet the contract requirements that we have. Okay? In each site, we've looked at the coverage viability that I just talked about. But beyond that, there's also construction viability, right? So if it's an existing site, does it have the ability to handle the equipment that we're going to put at it? If it's a new site and we're going to build it, there's a number of federal environmental impacts that have to be looked at, and so forth. Brian Gruey can explain a little bit more of some of those things than I can. But those all play into whether a site, if we deem it coverage viable, is it actually construction viable?
There are several sites that we found that, I work on all three counties' projects, Jefferson 9/11 Board, St. Louis County, and also St. Charles County. And there have been sites where, there's a slope to the land, and even though it's a great site for a tower and the coverage is good, to construct that site would be impractical from a cost perspective. I mean, anything can be done with time and money, but that wouldn't be the first choice. So as we go through these sites, we disqualify some sites for those types of reasons. Some other areas that we would disqualify a site from before we even go through an engineering phase would be if it's in the flight path of even a small airport where the FAA is not going to, we have pretty sound reason to believe the FAA would not approve putting the tower there. And certainly with the St. Louis Airport nearby, we have to be conscious of that as well. And then there's areas for national EPA standards and state historic that certainly we know, by experience through talking with local resources if those sites would run into any problems or likely run into problems. And this is all before we have to actually, go out for public comment or even actually apply. We try to add some low-cost intelligence prior to spending lots of money to do architecture and engineering work, only to have the site disqualified by a regulatory body, which starts to get really expensive later. And then after all of that is done, we actually turn it back over to the county for commercial viability understanding. No sense in going off and trying to acquire a piece of property if you can't pass these first couple of hurdles. That's in a nutshell what the process is.
And then the last element up there is just some of the impacts around change, right? So I think that's some of the questions that'll probably be asked. But this viability process, there's a cost and a time frame to do it, right? As we said, all these sites are impacted by each other. So you move one, they potentially can all move around. So there's a cost up there for just that analysis work, and then there's a schedule impact of 26 weeks to get through all those analysis and permitting and so forth.
I think a point of clarification on this is that, as we're looking at acquiring 12 sites in the county to provide the coverage that's needed, we may lock down and pass all of the viability and even get through the commercial side of those sites, especially if we're using a county-owned site. And we'll progress down the path of doing construction drawings, and that's where you start to run into the $30,000 to $50,000 pointed out on the slide. Well, perhaps another site that isn't as locked down moves, and that would cause us to have to move one of the sites we've already invested a substantial amount of funds in. And so that's why, ideally, although not practically, you would like to have all 12 sites locked down at one time before you spend any money. But under those circumstances, you would, spend a long, long time getting your system built.
I think we just had one left, which was master site sharing and stars. So St. Louis, St. Charles, and Jefferson County will share a master site. Master site is really the computer brains of the network that does all the audio traffic routing and so forth to make all your calls go to the right people. So that will be shared by the three counties to make it more of a regional interoperable system. That'll do a couple things. One, from a cost standpoint, there's upfront cost savings as well as ongoing maintenance and upgrade cost savings. The second is from a user perspective. There's some ease of operation for users that go between counties in an interoperable incident response. So at this point, with the integrated network, they will not have to have a manual user intervention to be able to talk to each other and roam outside the county and still be able to talk back. So there's some ease of operation, some operational benefits, some incident response between county benefits and some cost benefits to that. Okay. There's some additional funding coming from STARS for microwave.
A little bit.
So that's more with the county side. And then the only thing from a schedule standpoint with the mass site sharing is we've got a lot of sites in the other counties as well that will have the microwave backhaul that we become dependent on from a schedule and critical path standpoint. So that's something that we have to manage with the other counties to get all that connectivity in place.
And this is kind of a massive step forward. I mean, this will be one of the first, we're not the first, but one of the first areas in the nation where you have this kind of interoperability. We have, what we figure, 600 radios on and operating any particular shift, any day of the week in this county. And they're going to Jeff County to pick up prisoners in St. Louis County for a joint exercise, and St. Louis County's bringing folks over here. This is going to make it so that the system basically operates as one for these guys as they move about the metropolitan area. And so they will have hopefully complete ease of operation as the system is deployed this way. So it's really, I don't know, you were using the term world class, but I mean for our guys it'll give them excellent coverage, very clear voice quality, and ease of movement.
And I think there's a potential for a lot of future benefit as different agencies develop across the region as well. This allows for the flexibility, whereas the original 3 distinct separate systems didn't lend itself to that. It was possible, but it certainly wasn't as easy or as thorough as the new system would be. We have some candidate sites for where these should be, where that meets the coverage requirements of the contract, and we've been working with Dwayne and his team in order to secure those sites along with the admin office. And we didn't come here tonight with the exact locations of each of those. We do have kind of an overall map that shows them sprinkled throughout the county, and that's the map right there.
So wherever you see the yellow square is the area where a tower will be.
I believe there's 11 new towers, if I'm not mistaken. At this point.
We have 11 new builds as of right now, 6 of which are located on existing county ground.